I greet you this morning in the name of Jesus. It's a privilege to be here. I thank you, brother, for your prayers. And on my behalf, I feel a need of that. I feel a need of direction from the Spirit. I feel a need of God's an outpouring and a filling. And I just want to say thank you for each one for your interest in the work in Ukraine and for your prayers. God has been good to us. He brought us back here for a visit, which he has done almost every year for the last 22 years. And it's always interesting to come back and to see your family and friends, see our churches, and to observe. And I suppose if I would have been gone all those 22 years and never been back, maybe in for a shock. Coming back every year, we see changes. We see things that are different. Last year when I came back, my father was no longer with us. He had died the year before. There was others that had passed on. And we see those changes. And change is good. Change is, we all live in a world of change. But as the question I have for you this morning, your spiritual life, the changes that you have made in the last year, have they been good changes? If you come up to a river and you usually come into the same place and you observe a certain thing in the river, you know where it's supposed to be. You've seen it there before. You come up the next time and it's at a different position. You say, uh-oh, something happened. Did it go upstream or did it go downstream? And I must say that as I come back and I've observed some of my friends, some of my families, some of my relatives, there's been change. Some have gone upstream and some have gone with the current. The story is told of two young men that were boating, they were fishing, and having a wonderful time fishing. And as they were fishing, enjoying their catch, enjoying their time, their fellowship, whatever they were doing, they lost consciousness of the current that was moving them towards the dam. And over the dam was a great cliff. Over the dam was a great fall down into rocks. Once they heard the rushing of the water over the dam, it was too late. And they went over the water, over the dam, down into the rocks, and were lost. Much effort was put forth to save them, but both of them lost their lives because they were having a good time and not paying attention to the current, not paying attention to the direction they were going. The question I have for you this morning, are you drifting? Are you moving? Are you going in a direction? And if you are not paying attention to it, if you're not putting effort forth, you are moving. You're going down with the current. I remember as I thought about this as for a message this morning, suddenly I remembered a time when my wife and I and our children, this is probably 10, could be 15 years ago, I'm not sure. We went down into Crimea, southern part of Russia, and went to the Azov Sea. And the children blew up their floating devices, and some went out with maybe with nothing other than just went into the water by the shore, but some went floating out into the sea. I had driven maybe 12 hours, 14 hours to get there, and so I was tired. I crawled into the car and I went to sleep while the children were out on the water. I was just relaxing, enjoying hearing the waves, but suddenly I got a call. I heard a cry of distress. Suddenly we realized that several of our children were on a floating device and were being carried out to the sea. They did not know how to swim, and their floating device was just going on further and further away. And the tide was too strong for them to do anything about it, it seemed. As a father, I was distressed. I panicked. I did not know what to do. I'm not a swimmer. I remember the panic of that. As I thought of that, it just came back to me like it just happened. The overwhelming feeling of my children being taken out to sea, probably never to see them again. As I thought about that, I had to wonder if we as fathers sometimes are sleeping. If I as a father sometimes am sleeping thinking that everything is okay, relaxing. Well, how could the children know that they were moving out? They got further and further from the vehicle. They were further and further from Dad, who was staying there. Sometimes some of us as dads, maybe we do stand stand in place. Maybe we don't move, but we have lost attention. We are not giving the attention we should be to those that are being carried out to sea. And the danger of drift is very real. I'd like to read a verse in Hebrews chapter 2 to start this morning. I'd like to encourage us as we face life, as we face challenges of life, that we be careful. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1. Therefore, we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. That's in other versions, that translates into, we should take heed, lest at any time we should let them drift. Lest at any time they would be moving, or that we would be moving with the current. It's happening. And some of us, as I come back and I see our friends and family, have been drifting. There's a few things we need to know about drifting. There's no effort needed to be put forth in order for us to drift. If you're finding yourself in your Christian life just going along, unconsciously, not conscious about where you're going, not thinking about the direction, you're drifting. To stay at a certain place or to move upstream takes effort. Individually or collectively, we can drift. And if you are just looking at those around you, be sure that they're not looking at you. What happens when a whole group looks at each other? We have a reference in 2 Corinthians 10. I'd like to look at that, read that verse, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12. For we dare not make ourselves of the number or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. But they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. If you find yourself just looking at others in your church group, in your group of friends, and saying, well, I'm not so bad, I'm not any worse than they are, what if they're looking back at you and saying the same thing? And the whole time your ship, your boat, your group is moving away from the shore, moving away from safety, moving away from the ground that you once stood. We call that losing your moorings. And when you lose your moorings, you lose your connection. You lose what is holding you. And if all you're tied to this morning, if your moorings are your friends, if your moorings is maybe just your church, and that's all you care about, and you're looking at all the rest of them around you, there's a good chance that you are losing ground, that you're moving away from where you want to be. Our connection, our ground should be the Scripture. Our ground should be with God, with His holy word, with prayer, with the direction of the Holy Spirit, and working through the church. Your church needs you to help go against the tide. Are you losing your moorings this morning? We never drift upstream. The man on the mountain never fell there. He most likely didn't fall there. He climbed there. This morning, if you're just going what's easy, with what just feels right, you're most likely going downhill or going towards the dam, going over, and a danger of going over. Another thing you must notice, the further downstream you go, the closer to the dam to go over, the stronger the current, the swifter the current. And there may be no more warning signs for you. Most times in a body of water, if it is a place where it's developed, there will be warning signs along the way. And there will be things to warn you, don't go past this point. But what if you've already, in your stupor, in your daze, in your being involved with the things of this earth, you forgot those signs. You looked past those signs. You didn't pay attention to those signs. You thought, well, those signs are placed way, way far out in the safe. We can go beyond that. And then you get busy again with the things of this world, and you miss those signs. And there's no more signs after this, but you hear that you can start hearing the gushing of the water over the dam. We endanger ourselves if we let ourselves go too far. These men that went over this dam, somebody saw them, somehow they knew they went over, somebody knew, and they sent divers out to rescue these bodies. They risked their lives to save them. How often are we guilty of risking other people's lives by just going with the current? Can we say like Paul did, follow me as I follow Christ? In 1 Corinthians 11, I'd like to read that. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. He says, be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. Is it possible for you to say to your children, for your Sunday school class, or your teacher in school, for your students, you follow me as I follow Christ? Are you someone that people can latch on to follow? We need each other. It's true that we should not just be following a man, but there's times in our lives when we depend on the help of others to make it. And if we are drifting ourselves, we can endanger the life. Drifting parents will lose opportunity to save their children. Unfortunately, many times we find ourselves just doing what is easy for us. Ephesians 6, verse 4 says, parents or fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Maybe you are noticing someone in your family that is going too far, and you feel like your influence is no longer touching their lives. What can you do? Throw up your hands. There is a way. Just like I did on the shores of the Azov Sea, I prayed. I cried out to God. In my heart, I'm not sure exactly how it all went, but God heard our prayer. God brought my children back, and I to this day do not know how that was. But as my children came back, suddenly they were able to, either the tide changed, somehow the current changed, and my children started coming back to sea, coming back to shore, and they were saved. God is a God of mercy. He's a God He shows mercy to those who don't deserve mercy. He shows love and forgiveness, and he shows care. And for me, that was a physical salvation of my children. But for myself today, the spiritual lives of our children, am I concerned? How does it affect my heart, my soul, the spiritual salvation of those that are following me? Ephesians 4, verse 14 says, be not like children, tossed to and fro. Our children are depending on us as fathers to teach them and to bring them up in the admonition of the Lord. Drifting often ends in shipwreck. I'd like to read from Hebrews chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. Therefore, we ought to give, we read this before, but I'll read a few more verses here. It says, we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them drift or slip. For if the word spoken by the angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard? We are accountable. We are responsible as parents to look after our children and to teach them. And we cannot neglect this gift that God has given us. In 1 Timothy 1:19, holding faith and a good conscience, which some, having put away concerning faith, have made shipwreck. Some have put away the faith. Some have put away that which was taught by their parents and their grandparents. They've laid it aside and said, we don't need this. It's too strict. It's too tight. It's too narrow. They've put away the faith of their fathers, and they have made shipwreck. Acts 27, verses 13 to 20. Acts chapter 27, verses 13 to 20. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. I'd like to just stop and make a few comments on this. Sometimes I, as a father, have been deceived by soft winds of success, soft winds of financial success, soft winds of maybe it's success in the community, success in the church. When the soft winds blew, I'm tempted to think that everything is good, all is well, and I tend to make decisions that maybe will not end right. I tend to put my guards down. I tend to start trusting in myself. That's what happened here. They thought that they were obtaining. Paul had warned them that we should not go. But when they saw that the winds were blowing in their favor, they thought, here is the sign of what we need. Everything is going good. But in verse 14 says, but not long after, there arose against it a tempestuous wind called Eurocylidon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear out into the wind, we let her drive. And running it under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps undergirding the ship, fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, struck sail, and so were driven. And we, being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lighted the ship. In the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars appeared in many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. How is it with you this morning? Have the soft winds of affluence, the soft winds of financial success, it comes softly. It seems to, it's deceiving. And many times we think that this is just God's blessing. And we can get so wrapped up in it, get so caught up in it, and we can be deceived. And then suddenly we realize that we're in a shipwreck, and it seems like there's no hope. Let's be aware this morning. How can I raise my guard? How can I test myself? Where am I this morning with this drifting? How can I know if I'm drifting? Check yourself. I have a few points here I'd like to look at of ways you can check yourself. How has been your love for God, for His Word? When I was first a Christian, my ministers, my teachers, my spiritual teachers encouraged me to read my Bible every day, maybe a couple times a day. Spend time in the Word, spend time in prayer. And I did that as a young child. As a young person, I tried to read my Bible every day. There's times in my life when I would put it away. I would get busy. I would maybe read other books or do other things in the place of reading the Scripture. But this morning I'd like to ask myself, where am I with my Bible reading? Looking down the road 40 years later after I became a Christian, it's been about 40 years. I still find times when I'm looking away from God's Word. I get distracted with the soft winds that might be blowing, and I think everything is fine. And I go along with the current, and suddenly I have a shipwreck of some sort. Something wakes me up. This morning, how is it with your time with God? I'd like to read from Psalms 1. It talks about a wise man or a blessed man. It says in Psalms 1, verses 1 to 3, it says, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Where might you and I be spending time in the counsel of the ungodly? You say, well, we don't go anyplace. We don't spend time with the ungodly people. Today, you don't have to go anywhere. All you have to do is get the device that you have in your pocket. All you have to do is go to a place on your phone, and you will be sitting in the counsel of the ungodly. You'll be standing in the way of the sinners, and you'll be sitting in the seat of the scornful. But here it says, the blessed man, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. On my phone, I get a report about how much time I spend on my phone. I don't like that report most times. It bothers me how much time I spend looking at my phone. Maybe you have that too. Maybe you have a limit on that. This says here, a blessed man is one who his delight is in the law of the Lord. In his law doth he meditate day and night. And then it goes on and says how blessed he is. He'll be like a tree planted by the rivers. And it says that that bringeth forth fruit in his seasons. His leaf shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. This morning, check your love for God and for his word. Check your time, your prayer time. What are your prayers like? Is your prayer a bunch of, give me, Lord, this, help me, Lord, help me, Lord? Or do you spend time thanking God and praising him, interceding for the salvation of those of your friends and family? What is your time with God, your prayer life? Jesus gave us a good example. He was a busy man, serving people all day long. But he rose early in the morning, went up into the mountains and prayed many times. The challenge for me, I can get busy with with good things. Jesus was doing good things, but he treasured that time with his Father. He treasured that time of just communing with God. In Luke 18, verse 1, Jesus said that we need to, he was interceding, or he was asking the disciples, those who were following him, he said, you ought to pray. You ought to always pray and don't faint. Number 2, what is your desire? How is your desire to be in God's house? Can you say like the psalmist in Psalm 122, verse 1, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. I was glad when they said unto me, let's go to the prison service. I don't know if you have that opportunity here or not. Just trying to think what all you might be involved in here as a congregation, outreach work that you might be doing. I remember when we were in Mississippi, we could go to the prison. They welcomed us there once a week. Maybe we went every other week. But we would go on a Friday night, I think it was. And I could go anytime I wanted to and share the gospel, talk with these men that are sitting behind bars waiting for their sentence. And I was glad when they said unto me, I was glad when Brother Lawrence, older brother there, he said, Wayne, could you go with me? And there was times when the soft winds of affluence were blowing over me that, not this time. I got so much stuff to do. What about street meetings? What about the Wednesday evening service? Or maybe going to a neighboring service in another congregation, maybe a distance away. They're having maybe special meetings. And there's a time to get together with God's people. Does it bring joy to you? Does it bring happiness to you? Is there a desire in your heart for those things? How about when your neighbor man or the brother from at work says, hey, tomorrow there's a trade show. We can drive maybe 3 or 4 hours and be there for the day. We leave early in the morning, be there for the trade show, come back the same night. It's real convenient. I was glad when they said, let's go to the trade show or the farm show. How about to the mountains or to Florida or to maybe to go fishing? I was glad when they said them to me. If you could say you were glad to those things, and the thing about outreach, check your motives, check your desire, check, are you drifting? Was there a time when the things of God and the evangelization, the work, reaching out of the congregation, when that appealed to you more, when it brought more joy to you? In Hebrews 3, chapter 13, verse 13, it talks about exhorting and edifying daily. We need to do that. We need to get together in God's house. We need that exhortation from our brothers and sisters, and they need it from us. They need it from you, that exhortation. We need to get together. Check your desires this morning. Are you drifting? 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33 says that evil communications corrupt good manners. Be not deceived. Evil communications. Who are you communicating with? Do you find it easier to go talk to the men of this world, whether it be at work or maybe out fishing or wherever you're going at the trade show or whatever it may be, and enjoying spending time with them? Evil communications will deceive you, will destroy you. Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 to 12 talk about that 2 is better than 1. It's better for 2 to be together. It's better to be together with another one of God's people. If you don't think you can go by yourself, don't think that you can, if you find yourself withdrawing from the church, withdrawing from fellowship, you're drifting. 2 are better than 1. God help you to find fulfillment in relating to and being with God's people and enjoying it and encouraging those around you. If you find yourself separated from God's people and joining up with the world, you're drifting. You're going away. You're losing your moorings. What about your desire to witness? Since we're here in America, I got a new number, and I don't have many calls, but I've got a few of people calling telemarketers. My temptation is just to cut them off. Or maybe it's just in town. Do I have time? Do I have a desire to share the gospel? I remember once in my younger years, I committed myself to witnessing. And if I see somebody, if I'm traveling, or if I'm whatever situation I'm in, I will take the opportunity to witness. I encourage you this morning, if you find yourself if your desire to witness has been growing weaker, if you have not been so concerned about the lost souls around you, check yourself. You're drifting. You're going away from what, if we remember the first love, if we remember the gift of salvation that God brought to us, we're going to want to share it. We're going to need to share it. We're not going to be quiet about it. This morning, the next thought, number 5, if you find yourself increasingly enjoying the thrills of this world, if you find honor, recognition, maybe it's recognition from the neighbors, maybe it's from your community, maybe it's in the church, in school, and those things become more and more important to you, you're drifting. Our goal, our desire should be recognition from God. To be able to hear those words, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And it doesn't need to be a show. It doesn't need to be something that the neighbors will see. You in your prayer closet, you in your own personal time on the phone with a needy soul, sharing the good news of the gospel. God will give you recognition. God will remember you. You don't need to be looking for it among men. If you do, you'll have your reward. If you do your good deeds in front of men, you will have a reward in this life. But God is calling us to faithfulness and faithfully enjoying what He has for us. Let's not look to the things of this world. Let's not look for the thrills that our money can bring us. Today we have access to many things. As I think back as I grew up, it's different today. And the possibility to spend money on myself and around me and things that center around me is so easy. Where are you? What brings a thrill to you today? Are the things of this world bringing you the thrill, making your life, giving you some kind of meaning to life? I trust not. Let's check our motives. Let's check ourselves to see if we're drifting. What are some remedies for drifting? It takes effort. This morning, you put forth effort to come here. Those of us who worked hard all week, maybe even worked on Saturday, maybe you were busy doing something else on Saturday, and Sunday morning would have just been a nice time to stay at home. Maybe Wednesday night, you have a job, you're maybe a distance from home, you're working. You'd be tempted to just neglect the gathering of yourselves together, neglect the fellowship. It takes effort. We need to feed our Christian graces. We need the help from the Lord. I'd like to read some verses in 2 Peter that tell us what all we need to be looking about and caring for. And this is our spiritual garden that needs attendance. We need to spend some time there. In 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 to 10. Beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge. I'm not going to go over and describe all these things and comment on each one of these. But I think as we read them, allow the Spirit to speak to you. Add to your knowledge temperance, to temperance patience, to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. For if these things be in you and abound, they shall make that you shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But he that lacketh these things is blind and cannot see afar off, and hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. Wherefore the rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. For if you do these things, ye shall never fall. Let's put effort forth. Let's not forget what we have been saved from, what we've been called to. And let's be busy. And it says, if we do these things, we shall never fall. You'll never drift over the dam. You'll never go if you keep these things in front of you. God help you as you do that. You know, physically, we all look forward to the time when we have less responsibility, when we can relax, when these physical bodies, they grow old and tired. But you know, in our spiritual life, there's really no retirement. There's really no time when we can just relax and let the younger ones do everything. There's no retirement villages for the spiritual life. There's no place in Florida where I can go to and relax and rest. No Pinecraft for my spiritual life. Recently, I met a man who I learned to know about 20 years ago. He visited me and visited our church there in Ukraine. And ever since that, when we come back to the States, we try to meet up. And several times in the last 20 years, when I'd visit with him, and this time again, he's 85 or 86 years old. We were sitting beside each other having supper together, and he said, Wayne, he said, I pray for you every day. Every day I pray for you. And this has been going on for 20-some years. About 20 years ago, he visited us for the first time. We learned to know each other in Ukraine. That's something, as a spiritual leader, he is a church leader. He was a church leader. He may be retired from the physical duties, even some of the responsibilities in the church, but his prayer life is up to date. And I'm sure he's not just praying for our family in Ukraine. He has a list of men and women that he's praying for. And he's not drifting. He's holding his ground. He's holding his place in the sea of life. And he's an anchor that young people can look to find direction for their lives. We need to watch for the undercurrents, things that you can't see, but they tug at us. And it can be the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, things that come up inside us and can tend to pull us down. We must plan on going against the tide. You can count on it. The tide of popularity, peer pressure, the praise of men, false doctrine, liberalism or worldliness. Matthew 7, this will be our last verse I'd like to read. It gives us direction. It gives us a warning that if you find yourself in a group of people and you're looking around at them, comparing yourself with them, and you find that you're going right with the crowd, you're not sticking out, you're not being anything different, beware. Jesus said in Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14, he says, enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. If you find yourself this morning looking at those around you to figure out how good you are, and you're using that for your basis, you're going down the wide way. For us to make it to heaven, for us to make it to our reward, we're going to be different. And there's only a few that find it. Check your moorings this morning. Are we drifting? Look at the signs. Look at the desires of your heart, your relationship to God, your desire for His Word, your prayer life, your burden for the lost. What is it this morning? We're still at the beginning of a new year. We just passed 1 month. God has given us another year to serve Him, more days, more life. He didn't give it for us to spend on ourselves. He gave it to us to serve and to take others with us. Check the current. Check the tide. Check your moorings. Are you fastened? Are you connected to something that's secure? My burden is this morning for my dear brothers and sisters, if I come back in a year or in 2 or maybe 5, will I find you at the same place or at a safe place? Or will I have to look down towards the dam to find you? Or can I look upstream and say, hey, this congregation has made some steps in the right direction? We are either part of the culture that we're in, going with the culture, maybe we're criticizing the culture, but going with it, or we are creating culture. We are making differences. We're taking steps. We're being intentional about our lives and moving forward. I've been blessed. I don't want to be one here to just to speak negatively. I saw some of my friends, some of my relatives who've taken steps against the tide. They went against what the rest of the people were doing, and they made choices that are taking their families to higher ground. They made choices that are taking their families to a safer haven. How is it with you this morning? Where are we going? Which direction have we stepped in this past year? And if we keep going the direction we've taken the last year, where will we end up? Which direction do we need to look in a year from now so we can find each other? Let's kneel for prayer.